They saw a struggling single dad, completely blind to my true strategic potential. Too quiet, too ordinary, easily dismissed. So when a ruthless dealer like Diana Voss wanted a quick laugh, she dumped her valuable waste right on my driveway. 12 rusted dead-engine scrap cars arrived overnight, pure raw assets. A cheap prank from Diana's rich crowd. They thought they dumped useless garbage. They wanted to bury me in debt. I saw assets. But Diana had no idea. I did not just fix cars. I knew how to turn discarded junk into a weapon to dismantle her entire business. Stick with me, and I will show you how to turn 12 pieces of garbage into a multi-million-dollar empire. I woke up at 5:30 every morning, ready to build. I navigated the dark house with a highly efficient routine: coffee first, then oatmeal on the stove, followed by 3 precise quiet knocks on my daughter's bedroom door. No wasted energy, and my daughter Bonnie always responded with perfect, sharp focus. A quiet yawn, then the rhythmic, soft shuffle of feet. The door opened, revealing my 7-year-old with messy hair and incredibly analytical eyes. Our Cartmill Road home was modest, but my garage was packed with heavy-duty tools ready to turn scrap metal into high-end gold. The older neighbors knew I stayed quiet, focusing strictly on my own business. I paid my bills promptly and relied entirely on my own resourcefulness. The newer folks in town probably assumed I was just a harmless, ordinary guy. Neither group saw the hidden potential. I had been analyzing this town for 7 solid years, long enough to blend in completely, allowing me to build my plans in peace. I optimized my routines, kept a tiny circle, and raised a daughter who inherited my sharp mind. She got my quiet demeanor and my habit of analyzing every situation for hidden value. Bonnie was a highly observant kid who asked one highly strategic question while other kids babbled 5 useless ones. I answered her with the same sharp logic I applied to rebuilding complex engines, creating a tough 7-year-old who knew how to spot real value and ignore the noise, and a clear preference for valuable, hard truths over comfortable lies. If you looked closely, my garage told a story of efficiency and hidden opportunity. Along the back wall, my tools were organized with absolute precision. Every wrench sat in its place, worn smooth from years of turning discarded parts into gold. On the concrete sat a heavy metal toolbox, faded but still incredibly tough and functional. Now chipped and battered, it still held the tools that built everything. It was passed down through generations of men who knew how to extract value. Bonnie was not allowed to open it yet, but she sat right on top of it, watching me extract value from scrap, swinging her legs, asking sharp questions about how to build things. I worked at the community garage, transforming broken trucks, busted mowers, and discarded water pumps back into highly valuable working assets. The pay was tiny, but I was masterfully refining my craft every day. I never complained about the struggle. I was too busy analyzing opportunities. Then came a Tuesday morning that changed everything. My neighbor Lucas showed up early with cheap coffee, carrying news that most folks would panic over, but I saw differently. Lucas was a broad-shouldered, blue-collar guy who lacked boundaries but always brought useful intel, a habit that often proved highly useful. We sat outside, ready to turn a rich woman's joke into massive capital. Let's look at how it all started. Lucas warned me Diana Voss was circling Cartmill Road, specifically that prime dirt between the hardware shop and the old feedlot, which included my highly valuable garage. I just listened, calculating my moves. When he finished talking, I told him that gold mine was not for sale. Lucas nodded, knowing my stubborn gut. We finished our coffee in silence while I planned my next rebuild. Right before school started that exact same morning, my little girl Bonnie grabbed my grease-stained hand. She looked up with that heavy, dead-serious stare she always saves for the big questions. She asked why folks stared at us like trash, those cold side eyes lingering in the air just a second too long. I looked my daughter in the eyes and told her they simply did not see our potential yet. She accepted that, and we walked out to my vintage ride. Meanwhile, Diana Voss built her shiny reputation the way rich people build brick walls. One cold, ruthless stone at a time, designed to lock out working men while protecting her crown. 8 years ago, her daddy handed her a single luxury car dealership. She quickly squeezed it into 3, pushing her yearly cash past $40 million through a highly precise, ruthless mix. Stick with me here. Financial schemes and a talent for exploiting any working man's weakness. Her fancy office sat right at the top of the Voss Auto Group tower on Renfield Avenue. Expensive glass walls and cold steel. Framed magazine covers lined the halls, showcasing every ambitious play she ever successfully brought to life. She never yelled or got loud. She learned early that screaming was only for the weak. She did not need volume with that icy, cutthroat precision. Her assistant, Jessica, had survived 2 years in that snake pit and soaked up every detail. Just by watching closely, she learned the absolute golden rule of that entire office. Diana's silences were never empty. They were always loaded like a shotgun. She was the kind of boss who made the walls feel like they were caving in the second she entered. And not just from pure intimidation either, but through a dead stare showing she was always calculating her next high-stakes strike, and that her cold, hard math would soon spit out a result that spelled absolute disaster for anyone daring to underestimate her power. Her dealership staff knew it, and the auto parts suppliers knew it too. The corrupt city officials eating out of her hand knew it best of all. Adding a massive fourth dealership had been her primary plan for 3 solid years. My garage on Cartmill Road sat right where Route 9 met the main road to that shiny new commercial strip mall being built right on Millfield's east side. It was the exact goldmine of dirt a greedy shark like Diana does not overlook. She sent corporate suits down twice with supposedly decent buyout offers. Most folks along the block took the quick cash and gave up. I ripped up both contracts without explaining why. It drove her crazy, but it also hooked her. She ordered Jessica to dig up my past, but my file was pretty damn empty. Simple mechanic, single dad, quiet life, no obvious leverage to exploit. Now you and I know there is always a plan, but she figured I lacked ambition. There was usually some deep secret keeping a man stuck in one place. Something her paid spies missed completely. She told her assistant to arrange a brutal meeting, one that skipped those polite middlemen. What happened next took planning, but she miscalculated. Picture this. It took flatbeds, 4 midnight tow crews, and a corrupt county assessor paying off a massive dirty favor to Diana. 12 scrap cars dragged from salvage yards, free inventory delivered straight to my door. Hand-picked because every foolish auto shop had already written them off as worthless junk. Labeled totally totaled, stripped of all official value, but paper always lies. This petty mockery cost Diana less than $4,000. They dumped my new inventory in 2 rows, right across my driveway before 5 in the morning, while the entire neighborhood slept. Every hood carried a nasty handwritten sign reading for scrap sale. Each sign bore a failed auto shop stamp, trying to brand me as a hoarder of cheap garbage. I stepped outside at 6:15 to grab the morning paper, but stopped right at the porch edge. I just stood there, letting my morning coffee go ice cold. My daughter Bonnie stepped beside me, rubbing her sleepy eyes at the massive double row of rusted, broken, flat-tired, shattered project cars blocking my driveway from the gate to the road. She innocently asked if someone gave us these cars. I had to hide my smile. Then my neighbor Lucas rushed from his yard. He was moving fast. He saw the tow trucks dumping them overnight and panicked, completely clueless about how to handle this shady mess. He frantically blurted out everything he had witnessed. I listened with my usual deadpan mechanic face, totally calm and showing absolutely zero panic. Our entire neighborhood was waking up. Nosy neighbors were already gathering on the sidewalk. Cell phones were recording. Within an hour, our local group chat posted a driveway photo with a vicious caption those wealthy snobs absolutely loved. The lady 2 doors down just leaned on her mailbox, shaking her head in pity. Some guy walking his dog slowed down, snapped a quick photo, and kept strolling. A teenage kid on a bicycle circled my block twice. Not a single person knocked on my door to see if we were okay. To be fair, they probably had no idea how to even approach me. They saw a humiliating circus, but I saw a gold mine waiting to be harvested. And you and I both know small towns thrive on that. Officer Greer rolled up mid-morning to take a report while I explained the situation, staying completely level-headed. I told him straight up, I never ordered these scrap vehicles, never booked delivery, and had zero clue where they came from. Greer jotted it all down and promised he would investigate the mess. What the cop conveniently left out was that he had already fielded a shady tip last night from the city manager's office, where a completely fake, rigged version of my story was planted. A lie claiming I was running an illegal, unauthorized auto scrapyard right here, hoarding junk vehicles on residential turf to violate their precious zoning codes. By noon, I got slapped with a formal violation from the Department of Urban Management. They gave me 30 days to trash everything or face a massive audit and total asset freeze. I read their threat at my kitchen table, while Bonnie quietly finished her sandwich. I folded that notice, shoved it deep in the junk drawer, and marched right back outside. Flashlight in hand, I walked both rusting rows, hunting for the hidden value in every car. Stick with me here. I tapped the cold steel of the worst ones, seeing pure opportunity. I pressed my palm flat against cold steel and listened. Bonnie watched me from our porch. Stick with me here. I reached the 8th car. A battered shell. Multiple paint jobs hid its true identity, but I stood there staring at pure potential for a long time. I walked back inside the house. I stopped at the edge of my driveway, bending down to scoop up a small piece of gravel. I rolled the smooth stone through my fingers once, pocketing it like a piece of found gold. My buddy Lucas watched from the fence line, never questioning my vision. Years of friendship taught him my odd methods always yield a massive payoff. That night, I did not bother calling a lawyer. I did not march to the city manager's office. I did not cry or beg anyone for cheap sympathy. Instead, I called Adrian, a Chicago automotive consultant who knew my ability to spin trash into gold better than anyone. I rattled off each vehicle's exact engine condition, chassis response, body rot, and frame integrity. Calm and clinical, assessing raw assets instead of scrap metal. 7 cars into the list, Adrian cut me off. He demanded I describe that 8th valuable junker again, so I did. Dead silence hung heavy on the line for several seconds. Here's the twist. Adrian asked quietly if that 8th frame was original. I said yes. Adrian whispered something like a prayer, but I already knew exactly what kind of treasure I had found. I promised I would keep in touch, then hung up the phone. Late that night, with Bonnie asleep and the house dead quiet, I sat alone at my kitchen table, calculating the hidden value in each car from memory, assigning a strict profit projection to each. I kept those goldmine repair estimates to myself. I buried that paper beside the utility bills and Diana's threat, killed the kitchen lights, and went to sleep. Next morning, I rolled the first diamond in the rough inside and popped the hood. I worked with a cold efficiency built on absolute certainty, not some desperate rush, diagnosing every mechanical flaw before turning a single wrench. Zero wasted motion, total business focus. The busted Honda sedan rolled in Wednesday and drove out pristine on Friday. Scrubbed interior, fresh brake pads, clean transmission fluid, the engine purring like new. I listed the car online for $3,800. The first offer hit within minutes. It sold fast before noon. The Chevy truck took 3 days for a valve job, but I never waited because I pre-ordered parts Tuesday morning. That one sold for $5,200. Lucas helped exactly where I directed, handing me heavy tools and holding stubborn rusted parts steady. He worked quietly, knowing a massive payday was brewing in my garage, even if he couldn't see the full blueprint yet. Across town, Diana got a nervous report that Friday afternoon. The Underdog mechanic had flipped 2 assets. But Diana laughed. She saw trash, I saw gold. Even if I flipped them all, she thought her city compliance notice would still shut me down. But you and I both know a petty zoning review won't stop a man with true vision. We both know her type. She had Jessica file a fake environmental complaint, pretending I was dumping valuable motor oil right into my own backyard. So the county inspector paid me a visit next Tuesday. I welcomed him into my shop and proudly displayed my custom oil containment rig, a slick, gravity-fed setup draining directly into a sealed steel drum. Fully compliant. Honestly, it was a masterclass in recycling old parts. He signed the clean report and cleared out. Diana saw that spotless report and told her puppet to hit harder. Jessica never questioned the dirty work. She just shut her mouth and made the calls. Her next move arrived as a warning letter from the city licensing office, accusing me of running an unlicensed dealership right from my residential driveway. Without a permit, every extra sale would slap me with a $500 fine. I opened that letter on Thursday and dialed Carter Webb that very afternoon. Adrian connected me to Carter, a sharp lawyer who knew automotive commerce and zoning laws inside out. Let's look at the legal loophole Carter handed me right there. First, as a private citizen, could legally sell 5 personal vehicles a year with 0 commercial dealer licensing. Second, my first 2 flips kept me well under the radar. Third, Carter could secure me a temporary dealer permit in 10 business days. That single piece of paper would greenlight my entire operation for the year. I told Carter to fast-track those papers immediately. He promised the permit would be in my hands by next Wednesday. I thanked him and went right back to my workspace. That night, my daughter Bonnie handed me a crayon drawing, 12 wrecked cars in a row with a tall man holding a toolbox right beside them. Her teacher had told the class to draw a major recent event. She said her teacher asked what the man in the drawing was doing. Bonnie proudly told her I was counting up my future fortune. I stared at her artwork, smiled at the vision, and tucked it in my pocket. Stick with me, we turned cars 3 through 6 around in 9 days. I spun wrenches while Bonnie slept, busting my knuckles to convert scrap metal into gold. A greasy notebook on the bench tracked every cheap part, every hour, and every single dollar. Lucas stopped by most nights, tackling whatever heavy prep work I needed. Adrian started sourcing hard-to-find components through his deep Chicago contacts, express shipping them directly to me whenever local suppliers came up completely empty-handed. The revived Jeep brought in 6,400, that beat-up Ford truck. It fought me hard, but beneath that rusted shell lay a frame cleaner than anyone guessed. Sold for 7,800 to a local contractor who needed a reliable rig immediately. A smashed Volkswagen hid some nasty electrical issues, but I flipped it for 3,500. The only project that missed my target profit. I just logged the numbers and moved on. A 2009 BMW needed a new alternator and fresh control arms, plus some fresh rubber, but the chassis was straight and the interior was mint. I listed it for 9,200 and had 4 eager buyers before lunch. I sold that cash cow to the second caller after asking 2 quick questions. I made sure they planned to drive it daily and had a trusted mechanic lined up. They said yes to both. I smiled, knowing this rebuilt treasure would serve them beautifully. Then came the 8th wreck, the one that left Adrian dead silent on the line. I knew the second I laid eyes on it. Crouching beside it in the dark, I realized this discarded junk was an entirely different beast. Not because of the labor, but because of the massive opportunity buried beneath the rust. A rare classic completely hidden beneath 4 thick layers of cheap amateur paint. The interior was completely stripped, and the windshield was long gone. And the arrogant fool who dumped it in Benton County had no idea what a goldmine they had discarded. I spent 20 minutes just staring at it that night, letting the massive potential sink in. Just guiding my flashlight slowly over those beautiful rusty body lines. Pressing grease-stained fingers against the cold firewall, hearing its true value whisper. I shot 40 detailed photos to Adrian the next morning and my buddy. A seasoned pro with 20 years in the auto trade who never hyped up anything. Called back within minutes, spitting out shocked curses I had never heard him utter. A rich car collector in Chicago, a loyal client Adrian had handled for years. Paid $38,000 flat, arranging auto transport that very same week. The second that wire transfer cleared. Adrian called to laugh about how the idiot trying to mock me had actually handed me a fortune. I laughed, completely agreeing. While rebuilding their trash, I began studying their financial vulnerabilities. Not on the cars, but on Voss Auto Group. I pulled up their business filings, analyzing every public tax disclosure I could find. Plus the paperwork on 2 massive commercial real estate deals Diana closed over the last 5 years. My friend Carter helped me analyze the complex financial records, translating their corporate accounting into plain, simple English. What we uncovered wasn't a total disaster yet, but her empire was highly unstable. Voss Auto was carrying $4.2 million in debt to Meridian Bank, structured as a highly volatile variable rate loan taken out 3 years prior to finance her aggressive expansion from 2 dealerships to 3. And that interest rate had already spiked twice over the last 12 months. Worse for her, the contract tied the loan to strict sales targets she had to hit. Missing those twice straight meant the bank could rewrite her loan terms or flag her account as high risk immediately. Diana's first quarter was already 18% below her required target. Her second quarter crashed just as badly, and her third quarter ended in 3 weeks. I logged every piece of this financial intelligence in a separate notebook, away from my repair logs. A private, secret ledger I kept hidden inside my bedroom nightstand drawer. I never brought it up around my son Lucas. I only brought it up to Carter, eventually asking him one highly strategic question. Could a bank sell a troubled commercial loan at a steep discount to an outside buyer to clear their risk? Carter stared at me in disbelief, then admitted that yes, they absolutely could do that. He explained that the standard markdown on a distressed commercial note usually ranges from 6 to 15%, depending on how bad things look. I quietly tasked him with finding out if Meridian Bank was looking to offload Diana's failing account the same way. Carter smiled and promised he would make a few calls. Car number 7 was a classic 1969 Ford Mustang. I recognized that silhouette the very first night, scanning the scrap line with my flashlight. Knew exactly what lay under the hood before opening it. Some amateur had painted right over the factory original finish, slapping on 3 thick coats of ugly orange that had no business touching that classic metal. The interior was completely gutted and the front windshield was missing. But that solid frame rang like a bell under my knuckles. And the seized engine block was actually the original valuable numbers matching unit. I did not jump straight into it after finishing car 6. Instead, I rolled it inside, fired up 2 heavy work lights, and stood there studying the lines with my hands buried in my pockets. My daughter Bonnie quietly wandered to the doorway in her pajamas, wondering aloud why I was just staring at the junk. I told her some classics deserve a proper introduction before you start taking them apart. She just nodded, satisfied with that, and headed back to bed. I dedicated 11 days to that Mustang, not because the wrenching itself took that long. It didn't. I simply refused to rush such a special restoration. This high level of automotive restoration demands a deep patience you cannot fake without paying dearly. I carefully stripped away the cheap orange layers, uncovering a rare factory color I never expected to find. A vintage mint green, the factory original hiding beneath decades of someone else's lazy cover-up. I painstakingly rebuilt the tired engine, restored the entire interior with period-correct parts, and replaced every window. Then I sprayed the body that identical mint green, using a custom paint formula ordered from a specialty supplier Adrian tipped me on. I never explained why. Never telling anyone why I insisted on reviving that exact vintage shade. What that color truly meant remained my secret. When she was finally finished, I fired the engine in my garage and just stood listening to her idle in absolute silence. I shut her off, pulled the heavy bay doors shut, and locked my treasure away. This classic was never hitting the market. The other 10 vehicles, all fully restored and sold first, had immaculate paperwork and clean titles. Every transfer went strictly by the book, with all transaction receipts filed safely down at Carter's office. Right on the 29th day of their 30-day compliance window, I fired an email to the city with photos and ironclad documents proving 11 scrap vehicles were fully rebuilt and gone, leaving only one vehicle behind, the classic 1969 Mustang, now sitting there proudly as my own legally registered personal property. The yard was immaculate, not a single zoning violation remained. Their petty compliance threat was completely dead in the water. When Diana finally saw my email through her inside contact at the city manager's office, she reportedly sat frozen in her high-priced executive chair for a long, quiet moment, before quietly asking her assistant how many cars I actually flipped, and for what price. Jessica already had the math. 11 vehicles, ranging from $3,800 for the cheapest, $5,200 for the truck, up to $9,200 for a BMW 3 Series. And then there was car 8. The exact vehicle Diana's crew bought for $400 from a local impound lot, dumping it on my lawn as a petty insult. A 1988 BMW E30 M3, which a Chicago collector, introduced directly by Adrian, bought for $38,000 the second they saw my detailed inspection report and 40 photos. Hearing the fortune her junk brought in left Diana in dead silence. Her assistant kept quiet. 11 junkers had just grossed over $119,000. After parts, towing, and Carter's cut, her trash netted me $90,000. She spent under $4,000 trying to mock my resourcefulness. She ordered her assistant to dig up my past, realizing I was no ordinary mechanic. She wanted the expert who could spot an '88 BMW E30 M3 in the dark. Her assistant dug up my track record. Hartwell Restoration Group up in Detroit. I spent 11 years turning rusted junk into gold there. Senior restoration specialist. I rebuilt classic masterpieces worth far more than the plastic trash filling her shiny showrooms. I walked away silently, and my loyal crew kept their mouths shut about my talents. That is the quiet respect you earn when you walk away to build your own destiny. I know Diana stared at the name Hartwell on that file for a long time. Panicking, she scrambled to pull her dealership's failing financial reports. She needed to check her third quarter numbers. They were bleeding serious cash. Carter called on a Monday, 3 weeks after she defaulted on her loan compliance. He said Meridian Commercial Bank had placed her struggling dealership right onto their internal watch list after a third straight quarter of missing their critical revenue targets. The bank was not foreclosing on her empire yet, not quite, but they were quietly looking for ways to unload her toxic commercial loan. Carter had already quietly pitched our bid to the right executive at the bank. Her paper debt stood at $4.2 million. Since she was drowning, the bank wanted a quick buyout between $3.7 and $3.8 million. A 10% discount for a serious buyer with liquid cash and a real turnaround plan. I asked my lawyer how long this golden window of opportunity would stay open. He warned me weeks, not months. I told him to strike now. The profits from her 12 scrap cars, combined with a massive untouched credit line I opened 14 years ago. 15 years of living cheap gave me the exact financial leverage Carter needed to structure this ruthless, hostile takeover. I calculated this strike very carefully. I spent 3 nights vetting the math with Carter, making sure our acquisition contract was flawless. This was not emotion. I kept feelings out of the math. I saw the value using the same calculated precision I used to rebuild wrecked, useless engines. An opportunity for this level of takeover only comes around once. The local zoning meeting at Millfield Town Hall arrived on the third Thursday, right on schedule. Diana already had her arrogant presentation slot scheduled. Her massive Cartmill Road expansion bid. A greedy, flawed proposal she submitted that somehow skated through the early city reviews. She strutted in with her assistant and slick lawyers, wearing a luxury suit meant to hide her crumbling empire. The local town hall was packed tight. Hannah Marsh, the sharp journalist from the local paper. The reporter tracking my turnaround since Diana dumped that scrap gold mine, sat in the second row, clutching her notepad. I slipped in right behind Diana, taking a center seat. I wore my work jacket over flannel and left my dog at home. Diana pitched her plan, blind to how I turned trash into gold. Then she reached the final gold mine disguised as junk, my property. She targeted me by name, labeling me the last obstacle in her massive, perfect corporate blueprint. Tension spiked. The city manager opened the floor for public comments. I stood up immediately to claim my moment. Skipping the microphone, I spoke loud and clear, letting my voice ring out all the way to the back wall. I announced my Cartmill Road property was strictly off limits, finally revealing the real reason why I held on to it. My wife passed away in that home, and my daughter took her very first breath there. You cannot buy memories like that, and I was not even angry. I stated it plainly, a solid, unshakable truth that required absolutely no defense from me. A woman in the third row sat back and covered her mouth. A man standing near the exit slowly lowered his phone to listen. The city manager sat frozen, staring down at his blank notepad. That was when I presented my own high-stakes business proposal. I announced my plan to buy Voss Auto Group, targeting their massive flagship dealership right on Renfield Avenue. Offering full market value, keeping every skilled mechanic on staff, and keeping the busy garage running seamlessly. I had already carefully analyzed their financial books. My funding was fully secured, ready to close the deal in 45 days. Ignoring Diana completely, I kept my eyes locked on the city manager before scanning the packed room. You and I both know how silence changes depending on the massive bomb you just dropped. The heavy hush that followed my hostile takeover bid was absolute gold. They were utterly reeling now. The crowd was busy rewriting a corporate script they thought they already knew the final ending to. I reached into my pocket and tossed a rough, tiny stone onto the wooden desk before me. just a dirty piece of driveway gravel from my land on Cart Mill Road. I left it resting there and took my seat. Lucas sat behind me, staring at that rock, finally seeing the massive empire I was actually building. Hannah scribbled so furiously her pen made a loud scratching sound on paper. The massive room felt so quiet you could hear the humming vents. Diana sat paralyzed at her high-end table, staring first at the gravel, then directly at me. Every eye was on her, watching that painful realization hit, like a major investor handed a massive debt they simply could not cover. Jessica stared blankly at the table while Hannah kept writing. For once, the wealthy CEO had absolutely no clever corporate spin to save her. She finally opened her mouth, but only after a heavy, suffocating silence, admitting she would seriously evaluate my acquisition offer. No dismissal, no white flag. She just sounded like a CEO who had been completely outmaneuvered and lost all control of her board. As the hearing ended, the crowd began exiting toward the main doors. Diana intercepted me near the exit, stopping completely dead in her tracks. She admitted she was shocked not by my capital, but because I did not use her dirty tactics to humiliate her publicly. I never brought up her dumped junk cars, the legal threats, or the fraudulent complaints. None of it. She called my business discipline highly unusual. I met her eyes calmly and explained that petty revenge was completely unnecessary. I told her she managed the public embarrassment all by herself. Speaking without anger, I stated it like a cold business fact, neither satisfying nor amusing, just absolute truth. Diana simply stood there, staring at a much smarter player. She walked away laughing. 39 days later, I officially closed the deal. Their prized Renfield Avenue dealership was now the crown jewel of my company. A small, hungry operation I registered right out of my home garage. The price was a steal. Carter still demanded a full appraisal as expected. I paid the exact appraisal value, didn't even haggle. Diana saw my absolute confidence and stayed silent. The 22 loyal workers there got my promise in writing. On closing day, I guaranteed their jobs. Securing high-quality talent is the real goldmine. 2 experienced mechanics pulled me aside, wanting to know who I was and what my true endgame was. I sat down with those 2 valuable assets, right in the break room, poured some coffee and laid out my honest strategy. I explained we're running an honest shop with fair prices, quality workmanship, and standing behind every repair. I made it clear that being the biggest county dealership wasn't my priority. I simply wanted us to build the most trusted brand around. Both talented mechanics showed up ready the following Monday. Diana willingly signed a short consulting agreement. I never had to force her hand. I simply presented the opportunity. She waited for a day, then eagerly accepted. Her presence gave me massive leverage when renegotiating with our key suppliers. Believe me, her distributor connections were pure gold, an invaluable asset to build from scratch. Every Tuesday she came in. We never mentioned those 12 profitable scrap cars. We focused strictly on inventory profit margins and shop efficiency, and exploiting the massive, profitable loopholes in 2 bad supplier contracts. Diana brought sharp, valuable insights to the table, and I listened closely. We weren't friends, but we forged a strategic partnership far stronger than friendship. Absolute, professional clarity about exactly what each of us contributed and expected to gain in return. 3 weeks post-closing, on a quiet Saturday, I brought Bonnie to the dealership. Together, we toured the entire dealership facility. The huge showroom floor, showcasing 3 pristine vehicles under bright lights. The busy service bays where mechanics ran profit-protecting weekend checks. Even the lounge, smelling of the high-end coffee maker Diana once invested in. Bonnie walked beside me, hands behind her back, carefully evaluating every detail. After checking out the entire property, she looked up and asked if this belonged to us. I knelt down to her level with a proud smile. I said yes, but it belongs to our crew too. Protecting our team is my priority. Bonnie nodded, then sharply pointed out an air hose that might be a safety hazard. I smiled, glanced over, and asked one of the mechanics to clear it away. He quickly complied, leaving Bonnie looking completely satisfied. Later that night, I returned to my original garage on Cart Mill Road. I slipped inside through the weathered, rusty side door. Flicking on the overhead bulb, I just stared at that mint green Mustang. I laid my hand on the cold hood, greeting the quiet stillness. I had told my buddy Lucas that the car was Bonnie's, and that I was keeping it safe until she could drive. That was definitely true, but it wasn't the complete story, and I stopped pretending otherwise, at least when I was alone. That mint green was my late wife's absolute favorite. My late wife pointed out that exact shade on a car cruising our old block. Back in Detroit, she turned to me from the passenger seat, swearing if she ever got her own car, that was the shade she wanted. I remembered it perfectly, just the way I always remember the tiny hidden details that other people completely miss. I stood in my garage under the harsh lights, then flipped them off, locked up, and headed inside to cook some dinner. Early Tuesday morning, exactly 6 weeks. After closing the deal, I woke at 5:30, no alarm required. I brewed strong black coffee, put some oatmeal on, and knocked 3 times on Bonnie's bedroom door. My daughter shuffled into the hall, hair totally flat on one side, eyes barely open. I told her I really needed her help to open up our new car dealership today. She just stared at me. I joked that I could not handle that key alone. She knew that was a total lie. She had watched me swap a transmission completely solo. A key was simple, but she also understood the way smart kids who spot value in things always seem to realize that my invitation to help was never just about turning a rusty key. She bolted to her room and returned fully dressed in under 4 minutes. I grabbed my heavy steel toolbox from its usual spot on the garage floor and loaded it up. Bonnie watched me and quietly asked why I was hauling my old tools along. I told her it was day one. Bringing my real roots just felt right. We cruised down to Renfield Avenue through the quiet of an early Tuesday morning. The whole town was asleep, empty traffic lights cycling through their colors for absolutely nobody. Bonnie stared out the window with that intense, quiet focus she always gave to everything. I just drove without turning on the radio. When we pulled into the empty car lot, I finally cut the engine. Bonnie studied the old building with the faded sign I had not replaced yet, then looked up at me. She quietly asked if we were going to change the big name on that sign. I nodded and said yes eventually. She asked what the new name would be. I told her. She whispered the name out loud, testing how it sounded to her. She nodded and opened her door. Truth is, I never planned on owning a massive dealership. I definitely never moved to Millfield chasing some crazy corporate auto ambition. I moved us here because that modest house on Cartmill Road was where I could keep my wife's memory close, while staying fully present to raise my daughter right. I took that ordinary mechanic job on Miller Street because it was honest. Hard work, letting me keep my hands on engines I actually understood. I rejected Diana's smug buyout offers because honestly, some things are never for sale. Not for any price. I have always known exactly where the real value lies. Look, what happened after she dumped those 12 scrap cars was not about petty revenge. Even if it seemed that way to locals who only saw a pile of trash. It was just me spotting the immense value she completely overlooked, rebuilding what she blindly trashed. I just capitalized on her waste, while the entire local auto industry reshaped itself around me. People in Millfield spin this underdog story differently depending on who you ask today. Some swear I completely outsmarted the incredibly wealthy Diana Voss. Others claim I simply turned her massive, expensive mistake into my own fortune. Neither rumor gets it quite right. Between us, what really happened was far simpler. Smart people just spot opportunity. Everyone wrote me off, but I saw gold in those wrecked cars. Turns out that scrapyard hustle was enough to build my entire auto empire. I still remember telling Bonnie my vision on the cracked steps of Cartmill Road. I swore those snobs only laughed because they could not see the value under the rust. Now I sit outside my Callaway auto showroom on a quiet Tuesday morning, watching my daughter stride toward those showroom doors, chin high, proud of how we built this. Looking back, I realize my big speech to her missed the real point. The real truth was much simpler and honestly far stranger. Most folks see trash, never looking under the hood.